Welcome. I'm Jonathan Hudson, and this is Deep Dive featuring Hudson Institute. And in today's edition, we're going to analyze a long list of issues, particularly also last week's meeting between President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the grandiose plan of President Trump for the Gaza Strip, the hostage release deal, and the evident dire state of physical well-being of the three hostages who were released, and, of course, the regional dimensions from the Islamic Republic of Iran to the Islamist Hamas to other actors in the region. But before all that, let's introduce our panelists for today. Mrs. Rebecca Heinrichs, who formerly served as a commissioner at the U.S. Strategic Posture Commission and currently a senior fellow at Hudson Institute. Next to her, Brigadier General in Reserve Amir Avivi, the founding chairman of the Israel Defense and Security Forum, also known in Israel as Habitchonistim, and next to him, Brigadier General in Reserve Dr. Amnon Sofrin, formerly the Intelligence Directorate's chief at Mossad, as well as a senior official or officer at the IDF Intelligence Directorate. It's great to see you all, and I'd like to start with Mrs. Heinrichs. When we're looking at last week's meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, the Israeli leader dubbed this meeting as something that he could have never dreamt of, the outcome and the expected fruit that these various discussions will bear in the long term. Also, when we're talking about Israeli security concerns, of course, the U.S.-Israel relations and more. But what is your takeaway from that meeting, and what can you tell us also about specifically President Trump's grandiose plan for the Gaza Strip?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's a privilege to join you. I think that the important thing to take away from that meeting, and also specifically what to take away from President Trump's really very surprising aspirations for the Gaza Strip, is that number one, what happens in Israel and after this war, it's very important to President Trump and his administration about lasting peace and that Israel remains secure and strong. And essentially, I think what President Trump did in laying out this plan is he really torched the notion that there is a viable two-state solution. And so I think that's important to keep in mind. Now, whether or not President Trump can carry out this aspiration for his ideas for the Gaza Strip, of course, remains to be seen. But he already has other countries talking now about what they might do. For the longest time, we were just stuck in this stalemate. Nobody had any ideas about what to do for Israel and for a lasting peace. And so now President Trump really pushed the envelope here and said, we have to think outside the box. We have to think creatively. And he really has initiated that. And those important conversations are now happening.
Thank you, Rebecca. General Avivi, I'd like to immediately ask you, tomorrow there's going to be a meeting between President Trump and the Jordanian king, Abdullah II, during the course of which they're going to discuss, of course, the American leader's aspirations for the Gaza Strip, something that there is significant pushback against, particularly also from Jordan, alongside Egypt and others. But nonetheless, in Jordan proper, we're seeing very significant demonstrations by sympathizers and supporters of the Islamist Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood at large. What can you tell us about that, and what are we to focus on when we're talking about the intricacies related to the region?
We have to deal with two very dangerous axes in the Middle East. One is the Shia axis, led by Iran and all its proxies. This is the war we are handling now. And of course, one of the important discussions in Washington was how to deal with Iran and stop its aspirations to nuclear capabilities. And the other axis is the Muslim Brotherhood, is the Sunni radical axis led by Turkey, Qatar. We see them now in Afghanistan, getting stronger in Syria, controlling Syria. And in order to do that, you need an alliance. You need a Western Israeli Sunni moderate alliance with Saudi Arabia in order to counter not only these two axes, but also the Chinese, Russian, Iranian front as has emerged in the Middle East in the last 2-3 years. And I'm talking about Gaza. I think that more than 50% of Gazans really, really want to emigrate. They don't want to live in Gaza. We saw that even before the war. Huge motivation to emigrate. Certainly now that Gaza is ruined, there is no future in this place. And we definitely need to facilitate this. I think the Egyptians should open the border. We've seen 8 million Ukrainians getting out of Ukraine because of the war. Nobody blocked them. Nobody told them you cannot get out. This is what is happening now on the Egyptian border. And this needs to stop. People have the right to get out and go and build themselves a new life. And if it's not going to happen, Israel will have to find ways to facilitate for the Gazans relocation and emigrating somewhere else.
Something that should be taken note of. I had the opportunity to speak to many Gazans during the war, as well as their relatives, both in Judea and Samaria, but also in Israel. And I asked them, are you keen on staying there, or wouldn't you want to move? That was one of the main questions that I raised. And apparently I found out that there were entire campaigns of GoFundMe for thousands of Palestinians who were seeking to remove themselves and their families from Gaza. It cost roughly $7,000 for them to raise in order to bribe the Egyptian side in order to cross the border at the time before Israel entered the Rafah border. That is something that baffled me. And now, of course, everybody are claiming they're not willing to move out here in the region. Well, I think once the evidence comes out to light, people will realize the true nature of the characteristics of that territory. But nonetheless, General Sofrin, when we're looking at the complexities of making such a move, on the one hand, the Muslim Brotherhood is regarded by the Egyptians as a terrorist organization. Simply put, if the Gazans come out of the Gaza Strip, they will be incarcerated, or at least will not be granted access into Egypt proper. Something that we can expect, of course, since there are already hundreds of thousands of Muslim Brotherhood sympathizers in Egypt incarcerated. And in Jordan, the Jordanian Hashemite kingdom is terrified of a reality in which they would lose control of the country, as happened back in the 70s when the PLO entered the country and started doing its various atrocities against the Jordanian people. So why would they now come and say, okay, we will be willing to accept? What type of leverage is there?
I'm not sure that that's all I'm going to say. I'm not sure that they will agree willingly to get Palestinians into Rafah, into Egypt or Jordan, for the reasons you just mentioned. The leverage that the American administration has upon these two countries is money, finance, because they support them financially very, very deeply. So this is one leverage that can be applied. On the other end, the Egyptians and certainly the Jordanians know for sure that the balance will be changed totally, especially in Jordan, because Jordan is now, the majority of the Jordanians are Palestinians, second and third and fourth generation, but nevertheless are Palestinians. And the Hashemite king knows that if he will get the way to more people to come into Jordan, the balance will be changed and his regime will be in risk. So I'm not sure that he's willing to accept many people of Gaza, but maybe to some quantity, to some extent. And the same goes for Egypt. But nevertheless, there are other countries that will be forced, probably by the Americans, to receive people from Gaza. And I'm not sure that all of the people will leave Gaza. All the 2 million people that are living there, maybe part of them, maybe all of them, but I'm not sure that the majority will go out. To some extent, if you look back, since 2017 until 2023, only 300 people left Gaza. No more than that. And this is a large quantity of people, but nevertheless, it's not all of them. And Hamas, certainly, the Hamas activists will not get out. So people will remain in Gaza. Gaza will not be empty totally, just like President Trump means it to be.
Okay, well, Rebecca, I'd like to get your 2 cents on this, since when we're talking about the current state of play, we still have over 70 hostages in Hamas captivity. Of course, the first phase of the ceasefire is still in play. There are concerns, particularly amongst the families of the hostages that are still in captivity, about the fate of their loved ones, particularly after seeing the state of physical wellness of the three hostages that were released this last Saturday, and it really is heart-wrenching to see. It seems, and many have made that reference, but it's a legitimate reference to the Holocaust, the manner in which the pictures captured Jews in concentration camps. What is required from us in order to make that difference, to ensure that when we say for years now, never again, it's actually translated into reality?
Well, look, I would just say from an American perspective and somebody who monitors the general sentiments among the expert community, and then also some of these thought leaders, in the think tank world who really are leading figures in the American right now, while the Trump administration is clearly ascendant and quite popular. The sentiment has universally been shock and anger upon seeing the images of these innocent Israeli prisoners, hostages coming home. As you said, it does remind us of the harrowing photographs coming out of the Holocaust, and it is a very powerful reminder that Hamas is Nazism, and they want the genocide of the Jewish people. And there's no clearer, I think, visual than what we are seeing coming out from these exchanges. I thought it was really important to see President Trump just clearly state what all of us can see, which is the terrible state of health of these prisoners. And President Trump, said basically, our patience, the American patience is running out. National Security Advisor Michael Waltz said the same thing. Our patience is running out. And so there's a concern now that there may be the rest of the prisoners or the hostages that Hamas still has could also be in a similar state of health. And so great concern on the part of the American people. And, again, this is an entity, Hamas, that cannot govern. They're unable to govern. They're an illegitimate terrorist state. And if there was ever a time, for us to clearly understand that, it's now with these prisoners, these hostages coming home.
Absolutely. General Avivi, I'd like to hear your take on this, since naturally when every Israeli looks at those images, let alone any civilized individual from anywhere across the world, the word Rebecca used was outrage, and that is something that I can also relate to. How does that translate, though, since if the American patience is about to run out, where's our patience in this calculus?
Okay, so I think it's very important to understand what is going to happen, probably. We're in the first stage, the release of the first 33 hostages. It has been negotiated for a very, very long time, and without President Trump's clear message that there will be hell if they don't release hostages, I'm not sure we would have achieved this moment. Now, we started to talk about the second stage, but the second stage is very problematic because Israel is saying, and rightly so, in the second stage, Hamas needs to get out of Gaza, give us all the hostages, and they lay down their weapons, and this will finish the war. Now, obviously, Hamas probably is not going to do so without massive pressure. So I think that there are two realistic scenarios. One is maybe we can extend this stage and get a few more weeks and more hostages released on the same terms that we have now. Or the second scenario is that we reach the day 42. They are not willing to release any more hostages. I'm not even sure they're going to release the 14 hostages that they're supposed to release the last day. I'm not sure. But once they stop releasing hostages, Israel will go back to a full-scale attack on Hamas, but this time operating in ways we haven't seen before, and also dealing completely differently with the humanitarian aid in a way that will enable to disconnect Hamas from this aid. We have a new leadership, we have a new chief of staff, we have a new spirit, and I think that both the government and the defense establishment are very resolute, and they intend to win this war decisively. And in order to get Hamas to really release all the hostages, we have to put massive pressure on them. And it's not going to happen just by talking about it in the coming 2 weeks. This is the reality. And we'll have to deal with this. And this is what the defense establishment is preparing for.
Complex reality is an understatement, but nonetheless, General Sofrin, I'd like to hear your take on the following. Earlier today, as the Iranian Ayatollah regime is celebrating some parades about, its 1979 revolution and such, we had a meeting between Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and the leadership of Hamas, during the course of which he proclaimed that Hamas is victorious somehow. He proclaimed the same about Hezbollah and the rest of the proxies. If this is their definition of victory, may they be victorious forever. But nonetheless, I'd like to hear your angle about the following remarks of Khalil al-Haya, the leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, who said to the rally that from his perspective, whatever Trump has planned for the Gaza Strip is not going to take place. Is there a certain caveat here? Do you see the Iranians somehow maneuvering within the current dire conditions which they are clearly in?
First of all, the Iranians are engaged with themselves. They have to face what we call the maximum pressure that President Trump promised to apply upon Iran to make Iran go back to negotiation table and to get to some new agreement. He wants to stop the nuclear program of Iran by forcing them to get into some agreement that will chain them in some way and not to go on with that. And this is the main concern of Iran. Iran says that we're willing to talk to the Americans, but we're not going to do it from what we call a weak point, but from a strong strength point. And of course, it doesn't work out so far because they're going to apply full pressure on them, economically mainly, meaning namely the export of oil coming out from Iran to other countries that is the main income of Iran. But this is one leverage that the American administration has upon Iran. The second issue is Iran trying to hold up its proxies, meaning namely Hezbollah, the remainings of Hezbollah and the remainings of Hamas, and to try to broker out some fake show that everything is okay, we're still holding up, we're very strong, we're decisive, we're not going to give up, and that's it. And for the time being, please don't mess with us. But you know that reality is a little bit different, and Khalil Haya can speak and say that and claim that nobody can force them to leave Gaza. But in the end, if what we call maximum pressure will be applied upon Gaza Strip as well, he will be forced to do that, him and the others, of course. So declarations are fine, just for demonstrating that we are strong and we are willing to go on and we are consistent and so on. But nevertheless, they don't have the ability really to face the Americans. If the Americans will decide to apply full pressure on Iran, on Gaza Strip, they will have to give up and go with the Americans as well.
So, Heinrichs, when we hear the Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian, however, speak earlier today, he said, we don't think the Americans are candid about their aspirations to negotiate with us in good faith, as he put it. And at the same time, they're highlighting that they're continuing to help Hezbollah to rebuild themselves during the ceasefire period. All the while, we did see, of course, the White House Deputy Middle East Envoy Ortega coming to Lebanon, meeting with the leadership in Beirut, and stressing unequivocally that the United States expects the next government in Lebanon not to include either Hezbollah or Amal. But then comes the prime minister of Lebanon, Mr. Salam, and he stresses, we have established a new government, and lo and behold, 5 of its members happen to be members of Hezbollah and Amal. So where's the disconnect here? And is the United States going to hold the new Lebanese government responsible for those blatant decisions?
Yes, of course. I would take the deputy envoy to the Middle East, Morgan Ortagus, very seriously. She knows what she's talking about, and she made it very clear that President Trump is standing by and supporting the Israeli side of this deal, and that means that Hezbollah cannot be a part of the government in Lebanon. I mean, look, Iran is at its weakest point that I've seen in a very, very long time. They do not have a strong hand to play, so that the Iranians might want to project some sort of mirage of strength, but they are weak. The Israelis took out a significant number of their air defenses in the last very effective strike. Hezbollah is extremely diminished. Hamas is very diminished. And now you have an American administration completely supporting Israel, pulled out all of our funds from UNRWA, which was supporting terrorists in Gaza, pulled out of the Human Rights Council on the grounds that it was against our great ally, the Israelis. So when you have the United States fully supporting Israel, and Israel has been so successful at taking out Iranian proxies, and then President Trump unequivocally said, we, the United States, will not tolerate a nuclear Iran. It will not happen. So Iran does not have very many options here. And so it has to play ball with the United States. Otherwise, it's really playing with fire and the complete possibility of the destruction of what's left of its nascent nuclear program. I mean, so there's going to be a lot of bluster coming out of Iran trying to project strength, but the reality is Iran is very weak.
Absolutely. Well, General Avivi, I don't need to convince you that the Iranians are on their knees as we speak, and Mrs. Heinrichs, of course, provided a clear understanding of where the Iranians are at. Nevertheless, do you expect the negotiations to prevail, since the Iranians themselves, irrespective of their rhetoric, are quite clear about their dire state in which they're finding themselves?
I don't trust the Iranians. In my perspective, we're beyond talking. They are moving fast toward nuclear capabilities. They believe that this is the only thing that can really defend their regime and make them stay in power. And we need to do something about that. And I think that it's not just about Iran. It's also looking at the whole global arena. We're dealing with the whole front, the Chinese, Russian, Iranian front. And I've said it before the war, and I'm saying it now. I don't think it's wise dealing directly with the Chinese or the Russians. The US needs to build global deterrence. You cannot build deterrence just by talking. You need to stand strong somewhere. And the Iranians are the weak link, and it's time to hit them and hit them hard. And I think that to deal with Iran, this is a very pinpointed operation. This is 2 or 3 days war of attack, an airstrike. And attacking Iran, it's not starting a war. Attacking Iran, it's ending the war. It's really hitting their capabilities and making sure that this regime never obtains nuclear capabilities. We need to stop them. And if the administration is as resolute as Rebecca, I think it will happen. I think it's time that really we'll see a strong American leadership and willingness to defend the Western society, because a nuclear Iran will be devastating, and they're not going to stop. They learned the lesson from other countries like Libya. Libya gave up their nuclear capabilities, and look where Gaddafi is now. they are not going to do the same mistake. They're not going to give up their aspiration for nuclear capabilities. And if they don't dismantle immediately all their sites, I think we need to take action and do something about it.
General Sofrin, we don't have very much time left, roughly a minute, and therefore I'd like to ask you about the reports with regard to the yellow cake that the Iranians said that they would start seeking to produce. Is that report credible? And if so, what should be done?
The yellow cake is one step within this process of producing nuclear capabilities. That means this is what we call the raw material. After being processed in a way, and only then you turn it to gas on the conversion facility. So this is not the main issue, because they have enough material that has been converted and installed in the centrifuge. So they have enriched material enough to produce some bombs to some extent. That means that part of it is enrichment up to the level of 60%, part of it to 30%, but it's very clear that it's only a short way from 60% to 90%, which is needed to get it to begin designing the atomic bomb. And therefore, the yellow cake is not something that we have to be afraid of or worried about, because it's one of the initial steps of this process, and not the ultimate one.
It does indicate, of course, their intentions, which have been quite clear. The IAEA Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi came out and stated time and again that there are no other countries around the globe enriching at purity levels similar to the Iranians, which are not nuclear powers. And that is something we need to take note of. But this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to immediately thank General Sofrin, General Avivi, and Mrs. Heinrichs for all of your insights. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. This has been Deep Dive featuring Hudson Institute. Until our next edition, wishing you a good day.
I'm Eran Etzion, former Deputy National Security Advisor here in Israel, a diplomat, a strategist by training. I'm very happy to be at TV7 and offer my interpretation along my esteemed colleagues. The strong point of TV7 is to be a reliable source of authoritative insight in an era of shallow news environment that is very difficult for viewers to trust.